all, and I'll get started. So this is the CLIMAS Colloquium series, and it's in New Mexico this month. So we got our contingent here. We're going to do 3 presentations. My student, Jaylen Fuentes, I'm going to give his presentation for him, and then right after that, my student Vida will give her presentation, and then in the next presentation with Josue. So we'll get total 3 presentations, and we can, I'm not sure how we usually handle questions. We could probably do questions at the end just to make it easier because we're in a couple locations. So let me get started. Pick the right place to stand. So we're going to talk about Jaylen Fuentes research project, and most of these are taking place, 2 of the projects are taking place on the Lordsburg Playa. And we'll talk about where that is if you don't know. So we're looking at dust storms over this next few presentations. So our motivation is, well, it's a significant, one of the things that we're looking at is a significant transportation hazard all across the West. And we're just going to focus in on what kind of hazards there are in southwestern New Mexico, although this could equally apply to all over the place, and not only to transportation, to health, and there's a lot of other areas, but the focus of this one is going to be for transportation. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is we had 11 fatalities on Interstate 10 in New Mexico in 2017, and here's the listing of the different accidents, and they start all the way from February and they go all the way through the summer. And so they were all very touching accidents, you know, with all those were a result of dust because of the visibility. As the dust goes, the visibility goes to 0 and people can't see and they hit each other on the highway. So what we're going to be talking about in the next few minutes is southwest New Mexico. Get not much rain, 10 inches or so, because most half of it gets dumped in the summer during the monsoon. A few locations like dry lake beds, playas are found in the region, and one of them that we're going to look at is in Lordsburg. It's about 4,000 feet and covering about 100 square kilometers. And so we're going to be talking about dust storms. There's a lot of different types of dust storms that we've noticed on the playa. I kind of categorize them by the geographical impact area. So looking at local scale, everything from dust devils, which can impair visibility and you know, on the order of minutes to seconds, and then dust channels are sort of the next size, and a lot of those can be from very small erodible areas as the wind blows, and those could cover the highways. We see a lot of those in Arizona as well here, and then some of the smaller, like microbursts, like a dry microburst from thunderstorms, and then the gust fronts, and then looking at things like outflow from thunderstorms that are larger scale. And then, of course, in the early part of the year, in the spring, we get a synoptic scale, or those from cold fronts and big troughs moving in. So here's an example. I just kind of pick one example of one, and this is from June of last year, looking at during the early part of the monsoon, monsoonal moisture coming in, and a lot of the bringing in moisture into southern New Mexico, southeastern Arizona, and you can see sort of the impacts of that. If you can see my mouse, this area, you can see the kind of flow from, this is the water vapor imagery, bringing in, and then as you can see the thunderstorms appearing in southern New Mexico. This is kind of the surface map looking at it, sort of what's going on the stationary front, high pressure for much of the area. And then just kind of early on in that, looking at the thunderstorms. This is the area of interest where the outflow comes from, and later in the afternoon. So this is the aqua early afternoon, and then it actually grew to a much bigger area, and then the outflow came from the northeast, and it was going toward the northwest, southwest. And this is, we were kind of, and Jaylen and I have been looking at this, is kind of what the predictability of a lot of these storms. And when we're looking at one of the meteorological models is the HRRR, high resolution rapid refresh model, and looking at the surface winds and seeing how well do they capture. And this is just a snapshot of that event back in that particular one. And then this is a time-lapse camera for that same dust storm. It's on the playa and it's looking toward the mountains where the thunderstorms come from. So it's looking toward the northeast area. So this is right around 3 o'clock right there, and everything sort of comes up around like 4:30. And there's a camera that takes a picture every 5 seconds. So it kind of gives you a visual of how it looks like, and the visibility goes down to 0. This is the highway over here to the right. As you can see, at times you can only see tens of meters on those. So this is kind of where Jaylen and I have been working, and a lot of us focus on our project. This is Road Forks. So this is Interstate 10 on the second exit as you coming in from Arizona into New Mexico. So if you next time you drive through there, it's right after the Steins exit, and then this is Road Forks is the next exit, and then look over toward the south. And this is kind of the red is the fenced in area that was just fenced in by NMDOT. And we'll be talking about the instruments that we're going to be talking about are mostly in this area. We've got one camera here, but most all the data that we've been gathering right now for Jaylen's project has been in this area here. And this is one of the instruments that he's been gathering information. We're just getting all of our permissions through the Bureau of Land Management to get everything officially there. So we've got 2 particle sensors, one here at 1 meter and then another one at 3. Here's a time-lapse camera, one here and up here, and then another weather station. These are both automated, and another automated weather station right here taking data. So one of the things we've been looking at for Jaylen's project is looking at the impacts of the dust. As you can imagine, the dust comes from the ground, and then as you go up, the concentrations in some cases get less as you go up. So we're trying to characterize what a car sees compares to what a truck driver sees. And a lot of times anecdotally, we've got some information on the passenger vehicles, like it says on the slide, see visualize a brownout, while commercial trucks can see it better since they are sitting 2 or more meters above the ground. So we're trying to figure out how to quantify some of that in some of the instruments that we put out. So that previous was July, and this is August. You can clearly see when we get those events, and then the blue is the higher profiler. Those are the instrument that we use to collect dust, and then the red are the lower one at 1 meter. So you can clearly see a gradient in the dust concentration. These are actually numbers which can be used to extrapolate the concentrations. And this is kind of what you see in a car. This is actually from a snapshot from a patrol vehicle dashboard, what they saw during one of the accidents. So that's kind of the visual that we're trying to represent. In some cases, you can see more as you go up, and that's kind of one of the focus that we're trying to do for this project. So for this past year, we were looking at, so what kind of information did we get when we had the accidents? Because that's kind of our focus, and when the accidents occurred, what did it look like out there to cause the accident, and what was the conditions, the meteorological and the soil conditions. So we had about 50 dust events this past summer, and we had one accident this summer on July 13th, and we'll take a look at that. So here's kind of a snapshot from the traffic camera that the NMDOT operates at mile marker 11. So this camera looks toward the west. So those mountains in the background are on the Arizona-New Mexico border, and on the left side is I-10 traffic, and you can see when the accident occurred, there's the car stopped here, and then the camera was actually a little bit dirty because of all the dust from that summer, but you can very clearly see a gradient. You can actually see the top of the dust at times on this, so there is a definite gradient on that particular event. So we also we've been collaborating with other agencies, and we've been working with the Desert Research Institute, which they've got funding from the University Transportation Center and University of Nevada, Reno. And one of the things that they've been working on is this instrument called Santry. It's basically looking at the saltation of particles over using a wireless networked system. So all those little dots, this is the same Road Forks area. So all those little dots, we had 5 of these wireless saltation sensors to look at. The main purpose was to find out, are there signals that we can see in the saltation? The saltation are this larger particles that bump around, that hop around on the ground, that are sort of a precursor in time to the resuspension of particles. So we're trying to see how much lead time can we get by looking at the saltation going on and prior to when we see dust storms, because that's kind of one of the things that Jaylen's is looking at right now. And so here's one particular event in June of this year. So this particular time, these images started right around here, and it's really hard to see. One of the traces here is a yellow line. That's one of the sand trees. And this is unfortunately this camera is about 5 miles from where this data was collected, but it kind of sees in the distance the initiation of the dust storm, and we see the brown traces, the wind speeds it's about a half meter, and then all the other colors are the different saltation traces here. And we were trying to, and one of the things that Jaylen's looking at is looking at the kind of the initiation times to see about when do things occur, what kind of time sequences can we extract out? Can we get 10-minute or what's kind of the best case scenario? And is it worth having these instruments out there? If it is, then we could actually get more of these to actually look at an early warning system for this particular area and kind of tune it for the type of soils that are out there, and then the conditions like soil moisture things. So Jaylen's been looking at it. He's been the instrumentation technician as well as the study designer. So he's got another weather station out looking at winds and precipitation. As you can see, the blue traces precipitation is really nothing really fell at all in the last 30 days or more than 30 days now. But we still have a lot of bit of wind events out there, and this is at 3 meters. So at the height of the anemometer. So comparing this to the other station, you would have to add exponentially a little more winds, actually logarithmically. So these are probably more on the order of like 40 miles an hour at 10 meters. So we have seen, even though there's a lot of water at the playa, there's still areas that are dry on the playa, and those are still causing problems even now with lots of rain in some places. So as sort of a wrap up for Jaylen's work, so he's going to be adding in additional dust and sensors out at the road forks, and also we're getting permission from the Bureau of Land Management to put 2 more sites at the north part of the playa. And we're also collaborating some with Jornada, who's also be putting more instrumentation out at the playa as part of their national wind erosion network. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, make sure. And so we're sort of kind of putting our thoughts together in terms of how we are measuring the saltation, the wind erosion, particulates, and collaborating with them. And that's a USDA organization. So Jaylen's also going to be looking at, like I mentioned earlier, about the vertical gradient of visibility, putting not only the instruments that measure the dust, but also the cameras at different levels and try to extrapolate how much visibility we can see as you go up. And then he's going to be looking at some tracers, so look at dust chemistry at the Road Forks study area near actually NMDOT has a mitigation area that they did earlier this year, and looking at transport, water transport as well as wind erosion transport, and can we see differences of the areas and how much percentages of the dust is from different areas. So that's sort of a research part of his thesis. And then Jaylen's also going to be characterizing the weather patterns associated with the dust storms. We've done a significant part of that, but he'll be hopefully wrapping that up for us and putting that in his thesis and making a nice publication for us. So the last thing is just an acknowledgement. A lot of this got started from work with CLIMAS over the past few years and several other students in the past, but CLIMAS has provided the funding for assistantship for Jaylen. We've gotten funding from NMDOT, and then a lot of assistance. BLM has been a very good partner in this process, getting help in filling out all of the SF-299s and all the CXs and all the other forms that we had to fill out, and getting. They actually purchased some of the cameras and helped us with getting kind of smoothing out things with the rancher when he didn't want the cameras he took our cameras out and got them back, but that's sort of it's a partnership between a federal agency and research that goes on that really we've got to get understanding of how things work and what needs to get done, as opposed to with problems of ownership and things like that. And NRCS has been a key part of this as well, providing soil information, and we're still waiting for the official soil map for this area, but this kind of got them going to actually redo the mapping. And then of course, Stan, Vita, and Octavio have been out there in the field work, roughing out and with the mosquitoes and 105-degree temperatures out in the playa to change batteries and take out the SD cards. So I'll leave it at that. I don't know how long that took, but hopefully it didn't take too much longer. So we're gonna transition over to Vita, and she'll give her talk on dust modeling.